By popular demand, this week's comparison is for Toaplan's Zero Wing, infamous for its...
What happened?
Your game's gone.
What?
I say your game's they gone.
What?
Somebody set up us the bomb.
Okay.
It's you.
How are you, gentlemen? All your game are belong to us. You are on the way to destruction.
What you say?
You have no chance to survive. Make your time. Damn it.
Take off every zig. Zero Wing Ultimate.
In 1989, Zero Wing released to Japanese arcades, but it wasn't made infamous until the European Mega Drive port in '92, with its terrible yet awesome translation. Just months later, it was also ported to the PC Engine CD by Naxat, but if the famous "all your base" meme is all you know about the game, you're missing out on a real classic with creative enemy design and a killer soundtrack. And in this video, you're going to find out which port, the Sega or the PC Engine, is the one to play. We're going side by side with the arcade original as a reference to compare the graphics, music, and gameplay and see which port owns all the bases. The Mega Drive port is the only one to have the mangled intro, and it's honestly quite awesome. Not only does the poor translation give it a B-movie flair, but the actual intro is good, especially for cartridge standards. Even without the funny dialogue, as in the original Japanese version, it properly gets you in the mood to kick some alien butt. On the other hand, the PC Engine CD, known for its cool cutscenes, goes its own route with a completely unique story. This was also the case in Toaplan's other PC Engine port, Hellfire, that I compared previously. But while the former had a very cool intro and some fan service to boot, the cutscenes in Zero Wing are, rather dull. Sure, it's got full voice acting, but it lacks the kinetic energy of the Mega Drive intro. Not that it was ever in doubt with how iconic the Sega intro is, but even in Japanese, the Mega Drive has a cooler opening that hypes you up to start playing. No question, the Mega Drive has my preferred presentation overall. Zero Wing was a step up from Hellfire in the graphics department with more creative stages and enemy designs. So let's take a look and see how the ports stack up to the arcade and each other. Right off the bat, the first obvious difference between the ports are the backgrounds. Not only does the Mega Drive more closely match the dense starfield of the arcade, but it scrolls as a separate parallax layer. The PC Engine had plenty of games with parallax, but it's not used often here. To its credit, the PC Engine does have large sprites for the ship, enemies, and foreground that are close match to the Mega Drive and arcade. It also has colors that pop a bit more versus the Mega Drive, as expected, but overall, the sparse background hurts the presentation on the first stage. As I just mentioned, the overall stage design, enemies, and bosses are a step up from Hellfire. Some enemies here have an organic component, reminiscent of a game like Abadox, and overall, the stage layouts are more creative and interesting. Stage 2 shows off the superiority of the arcade hardware, with multiple layers of parallax intertwined in the background, that the home ports just can't replicate. At least the Mega Drive has detail there, along with the scrolling layer. The PC Engine is left with a basic pattern that doesn't scroll at all. The arcade continues to show its prowess in the second half, with each row of blocks scrolling independently, something neither console pulls off. the colors are more faithful overall on the PC Engine, and the foreground layer is chunky and detailed. So while it looks outmatched in the background, the foreground layer and enemies still look great. Stage 3 continues the trend, with Arcade having extra layers of asteroids flying by, while the Mega Drive is simply more detailed, and the PC Engine sparse. If you look close, the Arcade also has random foreground rocks floating by as well. The mid-boss on the PC Engine is also a bit more squashed and smaller than the Mega Drive and Arcade, and while the final boss looks close across all three, the PC Engine bot didn't eat his Wheaties and is missing a bounce in its step, simply moving linearly back and forth, while the Sega port moves like the Arcade. Stage 4 is very interesting, as all of a sudden, the PC Engine version has a cool detailed star field, and the Mega Drive doesn't. On top of that, the PC Engine adds a parallax layer of flowing water at the bottom of the screen. A promising start, but when you reach the platform, you'll notice it's completely static on the PC Engine, while both the Sega and Arcade versions have it bobbing up and down in the water. There's also less detail in the bridge, and the sprites are smaller overall, giving it a more diminutive look. When you reach the boss, the Arcade has a dense forest in the background, while the console ports don't. Overall, this stage is a closer call, with both home versions having its pros and cons, and putting on a fair show of it. The next stage is a PC Engine exclusive, a bonus, so there's nothing to compare. It has an underwater Darius vibe and sports completely unique enemies, but overall, I can't say it adds a ton to the game, or does anything particularly clever to make it memorable. It's a cool extra bonus, most likely due to the increased CD storage, although if you ask me, I'd much rather have they put the extra time into adding more parallax and detailed backgrounds to the existing stages. On to stage 5, where once again the Arcade rules supreme with multiple crisscrossing parallax layers. The Mega Drive does an admirable job with the one fence layer, but looks a bit drab and colorless in its background. Again, the PC Engine matches the color and design more closely, but has no parallax foreground layer at all. The more accurate background and detail even extends to the mini-boss. This stage is another toss-up, as the parallax fence on the Sega port clearly makes the stage more interesting, but once that section has passed, the more drab background doesn't stand out versus the more accurate PC Engine port. Stage 6 isn't the most interesting design, to be honest, but if you look closely, there is a lot going on with multiple layers in the Arcade original. The Mega Drive eschews that extra layer of parallax completely, while the PC Engine has none at all. The mid-boss is a bit smaller and redesigned on the PC Engine as well. The Arcade is slightly more interesting with the extra scrolling layer, leaving the two home ports with a pretty bland stage by comparison. But things finally ramp up on stage 7, especially with the cool enemy designs and layout. This is my favorite level, along with the final level for multiple reasons, one of which is the creativity on display. The Mega Drive is extremely close to the Arcade, while the PC Engine background is still a bit more sparse. But both home ports nail the important part of this level, which are the cool enemies and foreground detail. Mini skeleton xenomorphs with wings, alien slug creatures, giant eyeball plants with, mushroom head tips? Now I see why you like this stage so much.
Quiet, you.
Where was I? Oh yeah, creativity all around. A really cool mid-boss that spews swarms of mosquitoes that chase you around, and a unique final boss as well. This stage also has great gameplay, and where zeroing really picked up for me, which I'll talk about in the gameplay section. On to the final stage, where the PC Engine apparently was waiting with a few tricks up its sleeve. Aside from not having as many parallax layers, it looks near identical to the Arcade. What happened to the Sega port here? It's almost like the game's reversed, and the Sega is a basic drab background. Once you reach the mid-boss, the background on the Arcade changes, while both ports remain the same. Then suddenly, on the second half of the stage, the PC Engine port gets lazy and decides to stick with its same background theme, while the Mega Drive finally changes to match the arcade. The PC Engine doesn't even bother to match the rocky foreground layer here, and suddenly looks very bland. You had this stage in the bag, Naxat, you really did, but you blew your lead. This screams of rushed port, but if this wasn't enough to convince you, the big WTF moment is coming up next. The final boss. Do I really need to spell out a comparison here? What the hell happened exactly? Just a black background? Nothing? Did they really just run out of time? I mean, the actual boss looks great, pretty much the same as the other versions, but did they have to rush and compile the final build by end of day, or what? You're killing me, Smalls! To be fair, neither looks as sick as the arcade with the purple alien clouds in background and the parallax stars scrolling behind the roots, and it's a perfect complement to a manic and epic final boss fight, all while rocking to an amazing soundtrack that you'll get to hear next. And while the Mega Drive can't nearly match the beauty of this scene, it still does an admirable job of replicating the moment, along with incoming fire that makes the boss a proper final showdown. Despite its few minor shortcomings, the Mega Drive was already ahead in the graphics battle, and this lackluster final boss on the PC Engine is the nail in the coffin. I think the PC Engine port isn't a bad looking game at all, at least until the finale. It certainly feels like it was rushed out the door. The Sega port is more than solid and goes as far as it can trying to match the arcade original, doing it justice. Winner of the graphics battle, the mighty Mega Drive. Now, if music makes the game, Zero Wing's got you covered, and how. As popular as the opening track for their other game Hellfire seems to be, the remaining stages have some standouts, but that's about it. Toaplan upped their game with Zero Wing to bring you one of the baddest all-around soundtracks they've ever produced. In fact, I'd rank it up there with Tatsujin as their absolute best. To wit, Zero Wing has no boss music to speak of. The stage music just continues, which is fine by me, as just about every one is excellent, with a couple in particular being some of the best stage music I'd heard in any shooter. So how do the ports stack up? Cartridge versus CD, Mega Drive FM synth versus remixed instrumental. Who comes out on top? Take a listen and decide, but whatever you do, don't skip past the final Stage 9 music, unless you want to miss out on one of the most adrenaline-pumping tracks this side of Thunder Force. Do I even need to call it? It's in the fridge, baby. Doors closed, lights out, butter's getting hard, and the jello's jiggling. The arcade tracks are rocking, and the Mega Drive not only matches them, but it takes them to 11, with some of the best music on the system. This is better than Hellfire, folks. The PC Engine CD tracks aren't bad, nice renditions and don't stray too far, but they're a bit mild-mannered for my taste. And they flub it again on that last stage. What a stinker by comparison. The Sega tracks are lights out, folks. When the music makes you want to rip off your shirt and dive headfirst into the crowd, you know you've got a winner. Music goes to the mighty Mega Drive. So what about the gameplay? How do the ports compare to the arcade original? Well, since I'd never played the arcade before, this was my first opportunity to do so, and I emerged completely blown away. Not only did I have a great time with it, but it gave me a renewed interest in the game overall. The only mistake on my part was playing the arcade first, before moving on to the home ports. If you're used to the slower pace of only playing on the Mega Drive or PC Engine, there's a rude awakening in store. Just like Hellfire, while the stages themselves move slow, the bullets don't, and neither does your ship with a couple speed-ups. Early Toaplan shooters like Tatsujin and Hellfire were known for bullet speeds, and the arcade zeroing is no exception. While the levels themselves are simple, it's very, very easy to get tagged by stray bullets and get sent back to a checkpoint. That is, unless you're playing the international version like I was, with a 2-player option, which respawns your ship when you die. That may sound helpful, but in practice, respawning into a difficult section with no power-ups is also a quick way to lose any extra lives you've collected. But as luck would have it, during my playthrough, I was gifted the coveted 10-up midway through the game. You heard that right, that's 10 extra lives. It's a completely random item and given once you've maxed out your pickups. To get back on topic, after playing the high-speed arcade version, then going back to compare the home ports, the first few stages were not the most entertaining experience. Whether you play on easy, hard, or normal like I chose for the Mega Drive, the early stages move so slow, I was starting to daydream. Not only do the bullets move slower, but the enemies die much quicker, so I literally coasted through the first few Mega Drive stages while wondering when it would pick up. Of course, the designs, graphics, and music was all ace, but the snail's pace of the gameplay was not my cup of tea. To make matters worse, the PC Engine version doesn't even have a difficulty setting, so who knows what it defaults to? My guess would be Kids Mode, as it felt even easier than the Mega Drive. I'm all for easy training modes in games, but the PC Engine doesn't even give you the option. One level and no second more difficult loops. It just is what it is. For a console that's known to have players looking for challenging shooters to play, that's quite a disappointment. It starts out maddeningly simple, so for anyone who has beaten it before or a more experienced player, you may want to put on a podcast or something until you clear the earlier stages. Check out the very first boss in the arcade and how fast the shots move. The first time I came across it, I literally exclaimed, "Oh, what the hell?" when I saw that coming flying at me. Totally unexpected for a first boss. Luckily, I found this trick of staying up top near the eye to take it out without much fuss. But on the home ports, there was no need to bother. It was easy enough to just sit back and at least have a little fun dodging around the much slower shots. Zeroing has a unique mechanic of using a tractor beam to grab most enemies and use them as a shield, but it's never used quite to its potential, and the game can be beaten without it. I ended up using it more for fun than necessity. You can launch them back out as projectiles, but they really don't do enough damage to make it worthwhile. The bombs, on the other hand, are not only useful, but well implemented. They can also be used as shields and take a few hits and will explode afterwards. So saving your bomb for an upcoming mid or final boss becomes a strategy of ensuring it doesn't get destroyed along the way. The second stage doesn't up the challenge much until the final boss ships, where the homing missiles can catch you by surprise. The homing missiles are the trickiest thing to dodge in the game, as although they look simple, they speed up as they approach you. While the Mega Drive ships take less hits and die faster, at least the missiles move at a similar speed and can nail you. Not so on the PC Engine, with these much slower moving and predictable red missiles that are a complete yawn to work around. I don't say this with any kind of hubris. You can see for yourself here, side by side, how little of a challenge they present by comparison. Zeroing also has the same speed quirk as Hellfire, in that you can easily pick up too many speed boosts and make your ship way too fast. However, unlike Hellfire, which is generally open stages, not the case here. Zeroing features many levels with small, tight spaces and environmental obstacles, making it near impossible to navigate them with a super fast ship. You're about guaranteed to die soon enough if you grab too many, and I always limited mine to 2 or 3 max. In general, the stages on the Mega Drive and PC Engine ports match each other quite closely without any major differences. But because the PC Engine port has even slower bullet speeds, it makes the game an easier experience. The Mega Drive has an extra power level to its satellites, making them larger and doing more damage to compensate. But it's not enough to make it as easy as playing the PC Engine. Stage 5 is where things pick up for both console ports, more significantly so on the Mega Drive with faster bullets. The mid-boss of this stage is also where I really noticed slowdown rear its ugly head on the PC Engine. On either the arcade or Mega Drive, staying inside these looping satellites is a recipe for a quick death, but due to the slower bullet speeds and slowdown that happen here on the PC Engine, I was able to stay in there and point blank the mid-boss. What was initially a deadly mistake turned out to be a quick kill. And it happens again on the stage boss. Now, PC Engine games aren't known for much slowdown, so this just screams rushed port to me, almost like they had to take the Mega Drive code and had a limited time to make it work. As it stands, this is a tough boss on the arcade and took me a few tries to clear, and still a fair challenge on the Mega Drive. Here, it was minimal effort with everything slowing down. I have a hard time believing that Toaplan let this go unless they were under an unfair deadline. To be fair, there are only a handful of instances where this happens on the PC Engine port, but it's enough to ruin some important battles and make them far too trivial. Up until this point, I was enjoying my time with the arcade original, but nothing that blew me away or left a lasting impression. That all changed on the final 2 stages, where the brakes came off and the game became far more manic. This is true for all versions of the game, but especially so for the arcade. The bullets feel like they start flying even faster, and there's a whole lot of them. The stages no longer have dead zones, without much going on, and are near constant barrage. Stage 7 is where grabbing enemies for shields finally came in handy to avoid the occasional death from a lightning-fast shot. Even the music is amped up and a faster pace to match the rhythm of the stage. The Mega Drive port does a nice job here, with the bullet speeds also feeling fast enough to create a solid challenge, and a stage you won't clear easily without practice. Most importantly, the Sega port continues to not have any noticeable slowdown and plays perfect. The PC Engine port handles the level well, but again, can't hang on the mid-boss and makes an otherwise tense battle pretty simple. This is also a good time to point out that an important strategy in zeroing is using your indestructible satellites as bullet and enemy shields. They not only destroy all incoming fire, but damage and kill enemies as well. The final stage is another barn burner, and one neither console port quite keeps up with in terms of all-out mayhem. The enemy count on the arcade is quite high, and the large enemies soak up bullets, so you'll be fighting a few of them at a time on screen. The Mega Drive port pares it down a bit with less ships, and they still die faster, so they don't end up crowding the screen. This section is the gauntlet of the level that trips people up, first with the enemies flying in from behind, and then large ships to take down before fighting the mid-boss. Once you know what to expect, it's really not too challenging on either console without as many enemies crowding the screen. Contrast that with the arcade, where it's an onslaught of large ships to take down, creating a tense moment right before the mid-boss shows up. Once again, it's clear how much slower and easier to dodge the missiles are on the PC Engine, as they don't increase in speed as they approach, and are far less deadly. For its part, the Mega Drive does a good job here, making this battle properly tense, with both the bullets and missiles moving fast and creating a proper threat, even if the mid-boss doesn't take quite as many hits to finally kill. Then we have this pathetic excuse of an encounter. The final boss here doesn't even fire out homing missiles, so once you've destroyed the other weapons, all that's left is a sad bunch of dead space to dodge the respawning Dr. Wily ripoff. No challenge left, and an absolute whimper of a finale. The PC Engine port doesn't just flub the landing, it breaks its ankle on the dismount and lands head first onto the judge's table. While both ports start out on the slow side, and neither can match the all-out speed and mayhem of the arcade, especially toward the end, the Mega Drive is a very solid experience overall. In terms of gameplay, it's got no slowdown that I noticed, and while it's not nearly as difficult as its Hellfire counterpart, it's a nice challenge toward the latter half of the game. Some may prefer the CD music on the PC Engine, as it's not bad, though I don't. And some aspects of the graphics are a plus on the PC Engine port as well. But in terms of gameplay, I can't think of a single thing that it does better. Add a complete lack of options, difficulty, or loops, and it's pretty clear the port was rushed. I can't think of a single reason I'd rather play the PC Engine port over the Mega Drive, let alone the smokin' arcade. From the presentation, to the graphics, to the sound, to the gameplay, Sega is the unanimous winner in this contest. All of your base belong to the mighty Mega Drive.
力があったとはいえ大したものだ。褒めてやろう。
マサト、助けて！
くそー！アイレンを返せ！アビゴールもここまでだな。さあ、約束通りに。さあ、受け取るがいい。あ、アイレン！
マサト！ルードビッキ！これで本当に地球に平和が訪れるのね。
ああ、俺たちが平和な世界を築いていくんだ。さあ、 みんなが待ってる地球へ帰ろう。
ええ。
約束通りに。